Hey, today we are going to discuss the summary of the White Tiger book. So let's start. Overview. First, we will start from the overview. The White Tiger, which won the Man Booker Prize 2008, is a masterpiece by Arvind Adiga that captures the deep-rooted social issue of poverty and corruption in all excellent satirical way by keeping the reader gripped for the curiosities that it has to offer. The story is an autobiographical narrative by Munna, who comes to be later popularly known as Balaram, of his journey from his birth in the ditches of the village in Lakshmangarh to becoming a waiter, a driver, a murderer, and finally a successful entrepreneur in the suburbs of Bangalore city. The narrator, Munna, takes us on a roller coaster ride, with one side painted in the numerous bright colors of the life of the rich and the other side unpainted, left in black and grey, representing the life of darkness of the poor. Links between the two worlds are depicted in the form of seldom waves of desires in the poor to envy the rich and rarely so, vice versa. The author has walked us through his life from the darkness to the light through a letter that he is writing to the desk of Wan Jiabao, a premier from China, who will soon be visiting the city of Bangalore in India and is awaiting his grand arrival by the Queens. The author believes that the most respected guest must also know the real picture of the country that lies crushed under the feet of the ones with money and power. The first night, the introduction. It's past midnight in India. Balaram, who's also a murderer, is presently a successful entrepreneur in Bangalore and is writing to the Chinese premier's desk, is sitting in an air-conditioned room under a huge, beautiful chandelier, enjoying its beauty. All the while he writes his letter, he begins his story from his birth in the village of Lakshmangarh, only a few miles away from the popular Indian tourist spot, the Bodh Gaya, the place where Lord Buddha attained the enlightenment. He mentions that his identification feature and a gist about him could actually be better described through a wanted poster that is doing rounds in the entire India. They described him as Munna alias Balaram Halwai, son of Vikram Halwai, a rickshaw puller hailing from the district of Lakshmangarh, aged approximately 25 years, dark-skinned, thin-built, height 5 feet 4 inches, driver of a Honda City car, last seen near Sheraton Hotel, New Delhi, with a red block that contained cash of 7 lakh rupees. It was a prime of importance for Munna to mention to the premier how he came to be known as the White Tiger, an unusual name for a very usual child. Munna, who did not even have a real name as Munna, only meet a child, was given the name Balaram by his school teacher. Balaram was soon given the title of the White Tiger, one that is seen rarely once in a long time. This was during one of this periodic school inspection by the fancy inspector in a blue safari suit. When he interrogated the class to assess if they were being taught well, Balaram was the only one of the lot to answer all the questions correctly. "You are no ordinary, you are the White Tiger," the inspector said, right before he left. However, Balaram's stardom at school did not last long. So soon enough, he was pulled out by his elder brother Kishan, and they were made to work at a tea stall, owing to services to be offered to the stock. The landlord who'd lent the sum to his family. Now, stock was definitely not the real name of the landlord, but in the village, the landlords were given the names from what they looked like. The second night, Balaram continues to write to the premier at the desk of China for the second night in a row by talking about his life at the tea stall and how he hated that job. Kishan, his brother, knew about it but could do nothing. The routine went on until one day his father, the rickshaw puller, already old and emaciated, fell terribly ill. He and Kishan had to carry him to the hospital with the help of another fellow rickshaw puller. The government hospitals at the villages are not like the private ones in the cities. There is never a doctor there, while Balaram's sick father lay there on the hospital floor. among the numerous others sick and dying. Continuous appeals at the reception received them the same answer each time. The doctor would come in the evening. Well, the evening came, followed by the next morning, and no doctor came. His father got sicker and died. The mother had already left them long ago, but there was Kusum, their grandmother, always looking out for them and cooking them their favorite meat curries. Work at the tea stall was getting exhausting for Balaram as he was looking out for an alternative. Kishan came along with the most amazing news of how he'd convinced Grandma to enroll him for driving lessons. After excelling at learning to drive well, it was now time for Balaram to look for a sustainable job. He went personally from door to door of the rich asking them if they needed a driver, and each time was kicked out until one of the house's owners wished to speak with him and offered him the job. It turned out to be the Stocks mansion. He agreed to let him drive around his younger son Ashok in their Maruti Suzuki. Sorry for the disturbance there in my neighbors. The dog was barking, so I really sorry for that. He was pretty content. So now we'll carry on. He was pretty content with his life as the servant. He was responsible for washing the Pomeranian dogs, messaging the Stocks' feet in hot water, driving around Ashok with his wife Pinky, and sleeping on the floor in the servants' room. He was satisfied with the salary and the good food they had to offer. The fourth morning, during Balaram's service at the Stock mansion, the car door opened and a man in white kurta entered the mansion and sat in what seemed to be a very important meeting with the Stock and his two sons. Balaram, as usual, started loitering around, offering them tea and biscuits. While trying to eavesdrop on what they were talking about, from what he could perceive, it added up to the fact that the visitor was a great socialist who was the head of the ruling party, and all the landlords, including the Stock, fell under him. Socialists ate of the landlords, and the landlords ate of the poor that came from the world of darkness. Nobody ever thought of who the poor ate of, because the answer was no one. After talking about the money and the arrangement to be done to make the socialists win the upcoming election, the elite guests left the house. During the election, Balaram saw a lot that should not have happened. The names and age and other vital information was collected from all the potential voters from around the village, but no one was supposed to physically cast a vote. Everything else was taken care of at the authoritative and by Stock and other landlords who ruled over the village. If any innocent, honest man was seen heading to cast an actual vote, he was ridiculed and sent back. That honest fool, they'd tease. Amidst all of his, Balaram heard that Ashok and his wife were moving to Delhi and a driver was required to drive them around in the capital city. Balaram was taken to the capital city, hence into the light from the darkness. He was probably the first from the entire village to reach so far. Before him, the most worshipped at the village was the boy who would grab the job of a bus conductor with his khaki uniform and a whistle round his neck. The fourth night, Balaram continues to write his letter for another night, because that Ashok was a fine and well-mannered man. He was not like his father or his elder brother Mukesh, who he called the Moon. He was different. He had returned from America and he knew how to speak in a polite way with his servants. He recalls not being able to memorize the streets of Delhi and missing out on the right turns, or track down an address for the initial few days. A village idiot who only knew how to drive around the village and had never set foot in a city. That's what he was. After all, however, the pain eased down a bit when the mangoes left and it was only Pinky and Ashok to be driven around the city. They'd often go shopping at the malls, during which Balaram would sit down with the other drivers and they would talk about their masters and sometimes read the magazine Murder Weekly, which usually included an erotic cover on top and a story of mad lover who would commit a murder for his forbidden love. Pinky Madam still didn't seemed to take a liking for the city and always expressed her desire to go back to America. On her birthday, Ashok ordered her favorite pizza and afterwards went to a party at Connaught Place. The two came out pretty drunk in the wee hours of the night, and as Balaram drove them back, ignoring what was happening between them in the back seat. Suddenly, Pinky Madam expressed her desire to drive the car. She ordered Balaram to stop the car and step into the back seat and took the wheel. Soon enough, as she sped by, a figure jumped in front of the car and Madam drove over it. "It was a dog, wasn't it?" she remarks, but it wasn't. A child was driven over dead in the middle of the road. No one spoke of it for that night and for the next few days until the mongoose visits. That day, Balaram was called up to the flat, and in a sitting between Mr. and Mrs. Ashok, the mongoose and someone who seemed to be lawyer, a legal paper was produced in front of Balaram, the gist of which read, "I, Balaram Halwai, take full responsibility of the accident which led to the loss of life of a child." It concluded that he was driving the car alone that night and no one else knew anything about it. Under the witness of all, Balaram was made to sign it. The fifth night, Balaram tries to explain to the Chinese premier about the great Indian rooster coop. Every time a rooster needs to be cut, the owner opens the cage, pulls one out and slaughters it right above the eyes of the other roosters while the blood trickles down on them. Each rooster in the cage watches this, and yet not even one rebels or tries to escape. Soon enough, the owner opens the cage and pulls another one out, and this goes on and on. Balaram mentions how you find various levels of rooster cops in the society, be it the servants to the rich or the drivers or the citizen to the politician. One who may be unfamiliar with this entire system and hears the story for the first time may reason as to how could an owner put the entire blame of a crime committed on the poor innocent driver, or how could the driver who knew how to read and write could even sign on it. Such issues are not reasoned by the people who are part of the rooster coop on any of the levels. A few went by until one day Balaram was summoned up at the flat. Upon pestering Pinky Madam, the man was forced to inform Balaram that according to the police, since no one had reported to see the accident, his help would not be needed. Balaram could hear his sigh of relief palpably. No one else but only Pinky Madam could probably comprehend what Balaram was going through and how the weight needed to be lifted off him. He later heard the man bitching about the lady from America, when evidently Madam Pinky, who wanted to find the dead girl's family and provide them a compensation sum. Oh, the lady from America does not understand how it works in India. Little homeless children die in the middle of the road and no one even reports a missing or a dead child, and the case never opens, and the foolish lady wants to pay them money. That night at 2 a.m., while Balaram lay on his bed in his dingy servant's room with roaches on the net, he saw Pinky Madam standing at his door with a luggage. Without a word, he pulls out the car and drives her to the airport. Before leaving for good, Madam hands Balaram a brown envelope and says her goodbye with a thank you. Balaram drives back quietly. Days after Pinky Madam left was spent with Balaram driving around Ashok to bars during late nights and taking care of a drunk and sick master for a long time. The sixth morning, Balaram could see his master turning to be what he was not, but could not complain. He was a faithful, humble servant with a lot of respect he harbored for him. One of the nights he was asked to drive to a party at a 5-star hotel. After waiting for several hours in the night for his master to come out, entertaining himself with another gang of drivers and a news story from a murder weekly, he suddenly heard himself being summoned with the car as his master was waiting for him. Mr. Ashok emerged from the 5-star hotel, but he wasn't alone. He came out with a beautiful Nepali girl, or so he perceived from her slant eyes and yellow skin. They got into the car with his hand on her bare shoulders, and even Though Balaram did not take a direct look at the mirror to see what went on in the back seat, he could smell the mingling of their perfumes. A few days later, Ashok asked Balaram to drive him to the big building in Delhi once again, where he met all the officials and the money business was taken care of. He meets up a man there, and the man gets inside the car with Ashok, apparently important man, then continues to talk to Ashok about his personal life. Upon learning that he was going through a divorce, tries to convince Ashok to sleep with a whore with golden hair that looked like an English actress, once whose name Balaram couldn't recall. Balaram, sitting on the driver's seat, disapproves of it mentally and secretly hopes Mr. Ashok wouldn't go through with it, but alas, sometimes he finds himself driving to pick up a beautiful girl with long golden hair and driving them to a big hotel in Delhi with a huge glowing T sign. That night, after driving his master back home, Balaram got into the back seat, and after a lot of fumbling and rummaging, he found what he was looking for. He held a strand of golden hair in his hand and folded and kept it in his pocket. The sixth morning, the following day, Balaram slides out the brown envelope that Pinky Madam had left him and discovers that it was full of crisp new currency notes, 47,000 rupees. That is an odd sum, he thought. He then invites his driver friend. He shows him the golden hair he held in his hand, and the fellow driver promises to help. The same night, Vitiligo Lips drove Balaram in his master's collies to the hotel in Delhi and was able to arrange a golden-haired girl for him for only 6,500 rupees. However, he soon realized that she was not an actual golden hair, it's dye business. He screams at the manager. Of course, the original one cost at least 35,000 rupees. Balaram leaves the place in a hurry. In a few days, when the mongoose come to visit and Balaram hears them talking while he cooked and cleaned in the kitchen, he realizes Ashok was clearly displeased with the entire business of bribery. All we do is to take out money and give to these people time and again, he complained, but the mongoose explained to him how it was the time of election and all this was inevitable. The following day, Balaram sees the mongoose walk with Ashok and a red bag with Balaram knew contained money into the same big Delhi building and come out with an empty bag. For the next 2 days, Ashok was supposed to carry out the privately business alone with the mongoose gone back. Always remember to get the red bag back. It's an expensive one, Mukesh had advised. The second day, the routine followed. However, this particular time, while Balaram waited with the bag for his master to come down, he was able to grab a peek inside. It was full of crisp notes, the kind of money Balaram had never seen before in his life. It was like torture to him. Balaram's mind started wandering. Stories from the murder weekly started running in his head. His life for over 25 years, watching either the utensils or the master's feet or the master's dog flashed in front of his eyes. Pictures of himself in a glorious life a few years ahead flashed before him, which went off when he thought of his grandma and the rest of the family back at his village. What would happen to them if he did what he intended to? How bad could things get? Would they be killed? He pondered and pondered a lot. That day before sleeping, he took out the empty bottle of Johnny Walker from the car and smashed it into half. He then cleaned the surface and went back to sleep. He wasn't sleeping alone. Dharam, only a child then, who his grandma had sent from the village to learn driving and make a man of himself, slept on the floor beside him while Balaram lay with his eyes open. The lines read by the bookseller from the Urdu poetry book kept running in his head. You kept looking for the keys, but the door was always open. The next morning, Balaram asked Mr. Ashok for the morning off. He wanted to take Dharam out to the zoo, or at the zoo. He and Dharam saw all kinds of birds and animals. After a while, just before Balaram wanted to leave, they saw the white tiger appear. The white tiger walked around in front of Balaram's eyes, but he was in the cage at the side. Balaram felt dizzy and fainted that night. Balaram made Dharam write a letter to his grandma. I cannot stay inside the cage, grandma. I have to get out that evening before leaving with Mr. Ashok and his red bag. Balaram kept a 10 rupee note in Dharam's pocket and left him. He then drove Mr. Ashok from bank to bank and was finally asked to head to the same building of Delhi where all the transaction happened. By this time, Balaram was insightful enough to know that the bag would be full of notes, the kind he had seen just the other day. It was around evening. And it was drizzling in Delhi in the middle of deserted road. Balaram slows down and stops the car, stating to Mr. Ashok that there was a problem and he needed to check. He then steps out and in a while requests Mr. Ashok to step out to help him examine the tire which he suspected was punctured. As Mr. Ashok squats down to examine the tire, Balaram stood right behind him. In a swift motion, he picks up the half-broken Johnny Walker bottle and attacks Mr. Ashok on the head with it. These good quality English liquor bottles are always helpful whether full or empty. Blood trickles down and there lay Mr. Ashok beside the car, almost but still breathing. The job was not done yet. Balaram takes another blow at him and slits his neck right above his clavicle. He then drags the body to the bushes, changes into a clean, plain t-shirt with only a word printed at the side, just like that. Mr. Ashok had and then heads off to the station, squatting on the platform with a red bag, wondering what train to catch. He also pondered if he should head back and get Dharam along and decided to go for it while muttering, "Dharam, you lucky bastard." The seventh night. Balaram was about to conclude his invigorating tale to Mr. Vangiavo this night. He explains to him how he decided to travel to Bangalore in a zigzag fashion and not by the direct connecting train that would have been too easy for the police to track him. He mentions hanging around in MG Road, Bangalore for quite a few days while rummaging over how he was supposed to make a living there near the Cafe Coffee Day where the working class sat sipping coffee. He often used to sit and make notes of all that he heard. After days of groundwork, he concluded that Bangalore was a city of most people who worked in America, companies of the ones who slept during the day and worked during the night, boys and girls who got home at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning after that night shift that started by 11 p.m. With this idea in mind, he goes to a Toyota store and rents a coils. Now he starts calling all American companies and offers them the services. I want to provide you a taxi service to drive your employees to and from work at night hours. He was turned down by several companies and spotted the hurdle only when a lady on the phone mentioned that he was too late to call and how all companies of Bangalore already had taxi services for them. For the next step, he walks up to the police station, places a bag full of crisp cash on the table and seeks help from the local police right under the poster of him with the words "wanted" printed on top. In just a few days, he gets a call back from an American company who required a taxi service as there was disrupted after a police raid, and that's how the White Tiger Drivers company started its services, hence making Munna alias Balaram alias the White Tiger an entrepreneur who now called himself Ashok Sharma. Currently, he owns 16 drivers who drove around the city in numerous shifts, driving employees back and forth for several companies. He had a website and everything operated in the English language. The other day, one of his drivers, Muhammad, ended up killing a man on a bicycle in an accident while driving the girls home. However, the police took care of it the same night and the money business was taken care of the next morning. No one had to go to jail. Sometimes while sitting below the expensive chandeliers in his air-conditioned room at night while his drivers work, he wonders what may have happened to his family at Lakshmangarh, what the stork may have done after he had he had haven't found out, not seeking the right answer. He just prays for their souls to be at peace along with the families of elders. Sometimes when he questions his action, he wonders if he did the right thing. He wonders if it didn't still be worth it if someday the local police turn against him despite the bribery and turn him in. However, he does know the answer to his wonders. He knows that even if someday he ends up in jail, he would not regret for a moment slitting of Mr. Ashok's throat and fleeing with his cash. The system needed more of such white tigers like him, the ones who are ready to break out from the great Indian rooster pool. Brain-stealing quotes. These are some quotes of brain-stealing quotes. Fully formed fellows after 12 years of school and 3 years of university wears nice suits, join companies and take orders from other men for the rest of their lives. Entrepreneurs are made from half-baked, a man in hiding and yet he is surrounded by chandeliers. There I am revealing the secret to a successful escape. The police searched for me in darkness but I hid myself in light. See the poor dream all their lives of getting enough to eat and looking like the rich, and what do the rich dream of? Losing weight and looking like poor. You were looking for the key for years but the door was always closed. Sorry for the disturbance, my friends came off. So this is just the summary. If you like the summary, then in the description you will get a link to buy this book and read the full book and have fun.